Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of Darkly Devoted, a Gothic literature podcast, where we're going to be exploring the enduring appeal of monstrosity as a Gothic motif and why it has captivated readers and viewers for so many years through literature and in films and TV shows and popular culture in general. We'll examine how monstrosity represents and reflects on society and how modern characters such as the Penguin from Batman Returns fits into this tradition. Monstrosity has been a staple of Gothic literature since Mary Shelley's novel that was first published in 1818, Frankenstein. The monster in this novel is an amalgamation of human and animal parts, created by a scientist named Victor Frankenstein, who rejects him upon realizing the true horror of his creation. The monster is not evil, but becomes to be evil due to the rejection and neglect he faces from society. In chapter 10 of the novel Frankenstein, during the time where the monster is giving Victor Frankenstein a bit of a speech where he explains how being treated like a monster led him to commit the monstrous acts that he committed, saying, "Remember that I am thy creature, I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou devised from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I am alone, am irrecoverably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me offend. Make me happy, and I shall be again virtuous." And even earlier in the novel, closer to chapter 5, I collected quotes that explain how society treats beings that are depicted with the monstrous and ugly imagery that goes along with most of these Gothic monster characters in these stories. He held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaws opened, and he muttered some inarticulated sound. While a grin wrinkled his cheeks, he might have spoken, but I did not hear. One hand was stretched out, seemingly to detain me, but I escaped and rushed downstairs. Victor Frankenstein here is just afraid of this monster based on his appearance. Victor Frankenstein's monster, by this point of the story, has not done any monstrous acts, but already Victor Frankenstein views him as a monster. And as a result from this treatment, the monster of Victor Frankenstein begins to believe what others see in him. Again, going forward in chapter 10, the monster is speaking to Victor Frankenstein and trying to gain a bit of empathy from him. He says, "I am malicious because I am miserable. Am I not shunned and hated by all mankind? You, my creator, would tear me pieces and triumph. Remember that, and tell me why I should pity man more than he pities me." This direct quote shows how the monster feels about society's treatment of him. He believes that he is only acting maliciously because he has been treated so poorly by others. He questions why he should have more pity for humanity than they have for him. And on chapter 15, it is also again underlined that others determined his fate of being a monster before he even had a chance to prove himself. Victor Frankenstein's monster says, "But it is even so. The fallen angel becomes a malignant devil, yet even that enemy of God and man had friends and associated in his desolation. I am alone." The monster is demonstrating how he feels isolated and alone in the world. He compares himself to the devil, who is also a figure of monstrousness and isolation. Shelley suggests that society's treatment of those who are different or unattractive can lead to their isolation and suffering. Shelley's novel was groundbreaking in its time, and it's easily to see why the monster continues to resonate with readers today. It's not just the horror of the monster's appearance that captivates us as the audience, but also the theme of isolation, abandonment, and revenge that Shelley explores. The monster represents the ultimate outsider, a being so different from the rest of society that he cannot be accepted or understood. The survival of monstrous imagery in Gothic storytelling can be attributed to its ability to tap into our deepest fears and desires, its capacity to allow us to confront and process these emotions in a safe way, and the way that its versatility as a symbol can be adapted to so many different cultural and historical contexts. This association between ugliness and monstrosity in Gothic literature can be traced back to the genre origins in the 18th century. In early Gothic novels, such as The Castle of Otranto, physical deformities and ugliness were often used to denote moral corruption and villainy. And these villainous characters in these novels were often depicted as physically unattractive, with deformed features that are intended to make them appear monstrous and threatening. Now that we've examined and gone over some of the older depictions of monstrosity and monstrous imagery in Gothic literature, let's bring it back to a more modern example of monstrous imagery, and to understand what it is about monstrosity that has made it such a captivating Gothic motif for centuries. It can be argued that monstrosity represents the fears and anxieties of society at large. The monstrous character is often an embodiment of what society deems to be unacceptable or deviant behavior, and their presence challenges the social order. The monstrous figure can also represent a reflection of the darker aspect of human nature. A modern example of this is the character of the Penguin, as portrayed by Danny DeVito in the Tim Burton's 1992 film Batman Returns.
Odd as it may seem, Max, you and I have something in common. We're both perceived as monsters. But somehow, you're a well-respected monster, and I am, to date, not.
The Penguin is a grotesque figure with a deformed body and an insatiable thirst for power. He challenges the status quo and seeks to take over Gotham City. His monstrous appearance and actions make him both a figure of fear and fascination. When we compare the character of the Penguin to the monster in Frankenstein, we can see plenty of similarities. Both characters are created through a combination of human and animal parts, and both are rejected by society. The Penguin, in his origin story, I'm pretty sure in the beginning of the movie, shows how his parents abandon him because they can't fathom raising such a monstrous child. The monster in Frankenstein, for example, is familiar in its human-like appearance, but unfamiliar in its monstrous nature. Similarly, the Penguin is familiar as a human being, but unfamiliar in his grotesque appearance. Monstrosity as a Gothic motif has endured so many years because it represents and reflects on society's fears. The monstrous characters challenge the social order and can serve as a reflection of the darker aspects of human nature. Modern examples such as the Penguin in Batman Returns continue to explore these themes, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the first monstrous story, set the stage for the genre by embodying society's fear of the unknown. Frankenstein's monster and the Penguin both represent different facets of monstrosity, from the former being more sympathetic and the later more villainous. For its concept of the uncanny provides additional insight into why monstrosity continues to captivate readers and viewers. Freud argues that the uncanny is often associated with the presence of something that is simultaneously familiar and unfamiliar, and that its duality can be embodied in the form of a double or doppelganger. In Gothic storytelling, monstrous imagery often functions as doubles or alter egos of the human characters, and they represent the dark, repressed aspect of human nature that is often hidden from view. By confronting these monstrous doubles, the human characters are forced to confront their own fears and shortcomings. Gothic storytelling often explores the boundary between what is considered normal and abnormal, and monsters by their very nature challenge these boundaries and force us to confront our own prejudices and preconceptions. The survival of monstrous imagery as a motif in storytelling can be attributed in part to its ability to tap into these fears safely, and to also explore this darker aspect of the human psyche through the use of doubles and other uncanny elements. And with that, Darkly Devoted comes to an end. In this episode, we explored the sinister and twisted world of monstrous imagery in Gothic literature. We have looked at the numerous ways that Gothic writers have employed monstrous imagery to frighten and horrify their readers, from the grotesque and vile Frankenstein's monster to the spectral haunting in the Castle of Otranto to the evil and menacing Penguin in Batman Returns. This theme has appeared in a variety of media, including video games, television, and so many other films. And while the form and function of monstrous imagery may have evolved over the years, its ability to tap into these fears remain as potent as ever. This brings us to the conclusion of this episode of Darkly Devoted. Next time, join us as we venture into the eerie world of Gothic architecture. Stay spooky and curious, and have a good night.